So today we're going to talk about floppy bottoms. That's the uncontrolled, ill-defined bass floating around in your home cinema or stereo listening room, which is a product of the room itself. Let's start by looking back some 30 or 40 years to where this whole issue started, which was in the recording studio. Studios, unlike home environments, often have worse acoustics and worse monitoring or speaker systems than we are used to in the home environment. This showed up quite early on in the days of commercial music recording, when engineers faced with boomy bass in their control rooms would actually record less bass, actively turning down the bass controls to make it sound right in their own room. So, what the engineer actually heard was something like the blue trace, which is quite bass heavy, while what was recorded and delivered to us, the music buying public, was more like the green trace and effectively bass light. I'm sure we're all well aware of the very variable relative levels of bass on various recordings. So surely we owe it to ourselves as serious listeners to at least not add to the problem and get our own listening environments at least under a sensible measure of control where bottom end's concerned. Easier said than done? Well, it's not a dead giveaway, but it's nothing like the horror everyone expects either. Seems obvious, I know, but we start by identifying the problem frequencies concerned. There's basically two ways to do this. The first is mathematically. The second is by measurement. Let's start with the maths, before we discount it as being pretty well useless. We know for sure that room resonances, standing waves, call them what you will, come about when they physically fit the dimensions of a room, and so the maths behind that is really simple. And here it is. It's 170 divided by the dimension of the room in question. It is a little more complicated than that, as rooms have 3 dimensions, and there's also 3 different types of mode or standing wave. However, the basic calculation is that simple. Of course, you don't actually have to do any calculation yourself. Here's an example of a spreadsheet, the famous JBL spreadsheet, which will give you a statistical analysis of room modes. But only statistical analysis. Our software at least goes a little further, inasmuch as alongside statistical analysis, it will give you a 3-dimensional visual and graphical plot of modal distribution throughout the room. However, all mathematical analysis fails to offer any solution, can't even hint at what it might actually sound like, doesn't take account of the addition and subtraction of the very complex modal wave structure within the room in any meaningful way that relates to the way a room will actually sound or behave at any particular listening position. And just can't take into account any existing absorption the room may already have. Measurement, however, will and does take these factors into account, as well as give the opportunity for a before and after treatment comparison. Let's look at the 2 main options. First, there's some kind of dedicated acoustics analyzer. If the analysis takes place by a specialist, this can be expensive. Or you can use a computer with specialist software yourself. The problem with this is that the results are often as meaningless and difficult to interpret as the mathematical approach. The other, and by far the best way to conduct measurements, is with your own ears. The most sensible, storytelling, accurate and sensitive measurement system known on the planet. Coming up is a little demonstration of just this sort of test. For a signal source, we use a stepped tone set. It starts quite low in frequency and increases in just 5 Hz steps. 5 Hz is enough resolution to identify standing waves or groups of standing waves misbehaving, and far enough apart for us to easily detect the different tones. Have a look at this and you'll see just how easy and how obvious it is to recognize standing wave activity. Well, here we are, pen and paper at the ready, and we'll now have a listen to the stepped test tone set, and you can hear exactly the sort of thing we mean. Here we go. Tone number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. There we go. We'll go back and give that a little bit of thought now. And I've just made a note of tone number 3 being very loud, tone number 2 and 4 either side of it being slightly louder, and tone number 14 being loud. Let's see. Right, let's check our findings against this graph. When we look at the graph, bear in mind what you heard may be slightly different to what I heard because you are in another acoustic environment. However, my results centered around 2, 3 and 4 are between 60 and 70 Hz, with 65 being the center. It's also likely that the louder tone at tone number 14 is a harmonic of something lower in frequency. The frequency of 14 is 120, and we know we've got a problem around the 60, 65, 70 region, so that would make some kind of sense. The activity at 120 might well just be a harmonic and repeat of that we can hear going on at 60. Sure, we have a lucky room here and it's really quite well behaved, but it proves the point well that there's no need for expensive or exotic measurement, and there's no need for heavy, horrible calculations which end up with results that are very difficult to really relate to what we might actually hear and experience orally. Fixing the problem's pretty easy. It's ascertaining what to fix that's often more problematic, and that we've just proved you can do in probably less than a minute of actual listening test. We could very, very safely add a bit of DSP serious notch filter centered at 65 Hz, our major problem, and with very, very few tweaks and a few listening tests to real music, instantly hear a vast improvement. Alternatively, or in conjunction with electronic trickery, you could employ acoustic bass trapping. More effective in many respects, as it's treating the problem, which is the room, let's not forget, at source. And in many ways more realistic, as it's not only treating the sound that emanates from a music or cinema reproduction system, but every sound that occurs in the room. Real physical bass trapping does have other advantages too. It removes big lumps of high and low pressure within the room, which has an effect of cleaning up and sweetening the mid and top, as well as making imaging a lot nicer and deeper. In any event, we now know for absolutely certain where the problem areas are, in a really simple, easy to understand, easy to do manner. Really, what could be simpler?